Big Night from 1996. The IMDb synopsis is New Jersey 1950s, two brothers run an Italian restaurant. Business is not going well as rival Italian restaurant is out competing them. In a final effort to save the restaurant, the brothers plan to pull on an evening of incredible food. The movie stars Stanley Tucci, Tony Shalhoub as the brothers, and a whole bunch of other great folks in there. Directed by Campbell Scott and Stanley Tucci, and written by Stanley Tucci as well. So kind of a tour de force on his part. So I watched this movie, I think in the late 2000s, I want to say, or maybe even early 2010s. I can't remember exactly. But for me, this movie kind of exemplifies this tension between staying true to your roots as a food person once you know enough about it, versus what the people around you expect from you. And those people could be friends, those people could be customers in this scenario because it's a business. And it's sort of it's a very interesting, it's a very funny movie, of course, and very entertaining and scrumptious and all of that. But I think of all of my picks, this is the movie that has a bit of that darker edge to it because of this tension. Because as you get more and more familiar with food, you start eating at restaurants that are one of those, multi-course, multi-cuisine restaurants, which I've been lucky to have a chance to do. You can start to cross over a little bit to the side where food starts to become a little bit too precious, and I think that's the essential tension here between the two brothers. And at the same time, how do you stay authentic to what you're preparing and what you're cooking? So I think I watched this movie in my life when I think I started to cook already and I started to get into food in a bigger way. And I watched this movie and it sort of hit home in that sense because I was starting to cross over to that side a little bit where if I went along with people who didn't appreciate the food the way it was meant to be, I would get a little bit, sour. or and such. And I think I've had a journey since to try and include people and show them a way and find them, help them get into it in a way. It doesn't have to be door slam the door in their face policy, which is sort of where I started to get to
Ah,
a little bit in that early time because I was kind of freshly getting all into it and excited and such. So that's what this movie represents to me. But then it also really underscores and underlines how family and food and the two bonds kind of underline each other. Ultimately this is a story of these two brothers and how they support each other and how they almost have this unspoken food language. While one of them is preparing a risotto, the other one already has the next ingredient chopped up and ready without even saying that. And I think I've experienced that with my mom and my sister, who's a baker now. When I go back home, there is sort of this shorthand that's already developed. And I think it's partly because your family members, but partly also because food is underlying that. So I think that really spoke to me here. And then last but not the least, the final dinner scene in this movie where everybody's on this table, this amazing, delicious Italian food, people of all walks of life, all races and ethnic backgrounds and social backgrounds and such are there having a good time. The older I get, I realize that yes, food is about enjoying the delicious flavors of it and the fun and the joy you get in cooking, but the ultimate pleasure is really breaking bread with family and friends. And I think that dinner scene really exemplifies that for me. It's sort of become like a pick me up scene when I'm a little bit down in life now. I just go and watch that dinner scene. It somehow just feels that all the problems that people have dissipated for that hour 2 hour long period because you're just connected. And I think good food, yes, is meant to be appreciated on itself, but it creates this foundation for great connection to happen. So that's why this movie is important to me. And not to mention everybody is great in the cast. Stanley Tucci is amazing. People whose careers I've followed since watching this movie. So that's my number three, Big Night.
Great. Yeah,
Have you seen it?
I have seen this film on VHS in the late 90s. So I don't have a lot of memories of it other than, like you said, that last scene is I mean, I definitely, as you were describing it, can play it back in my mind of that's what I remember in that movie. The final scene, everyone there eating that whole meal, and really that message of food bringing people together through all walks of life. And it wasn't, I also love Italian food. So it's cool it was Italian food, but it really that was not the point of that scene either. The food could have been anything. But that is the scene that definitely resonated a lot with me too. It's interesting when you talk about as well, like this evolution that you were having around food being like, yeah, like you were saying, too precious, or the looking down upon people that don't appreciate it. Was that something that you had always had, as because again, I wasn't someone who grew up appreciating food. Was that part and parcel with appreciating food for you, and this is when you were like casting that off or starting to, or was this something that you kind of gained later in life and then we're starting to realize, well, maybe I could put this aside because it's not necessarily about that? Like, what was the evolution of that for you?
Yeah, more of the latter, because I think I watched this movie when I started to really take food seriously. But before then, not really. I didn't,
Mm.
I was sort of a passive appreciator, like I was saying. So this wasn't really a thing, but it started to become a thing a little bit later in life once I started to get into it.
Yeah. So again, I said my first exposure to this film, actually, I think I might have only seen it once, was on VHS in the late 90s. This movie was sort of talked about as like an indie darling around that time, which is why I rented it at the video store. How did you come across this? So, like, coming across it like 10 years after it came out. It's talked about still sometimes, but it's not very well known. Like, what made you gravitate towards this film?
I don't remember, but maybe I was, specifically searching for food movies and must have read the plot description and seen, oh, Stanley Tucci, I've seen him in other stuff and loved other stuff. So let me just watch it. So I don't really remember, but that's probably what it might have been. But I'm so happy to have discovered it.
Yeah, no, it is a great film. And like I said, that last scene still definitely sits with me. I want to go watch that on YouTube after this. I'll look that up.
Hey there, it's Alex. If you like the review and discussion Karan and I just had, make sure you subscribe to our channel, Movies That Shaped Us, to get full episodes. Every other Wednesday, Karan and I cover a topic around important people, places, events, and moments in our lives, and then explore it through 3 of our favorite movies. Subscribe right now or follow our podcast on Spotify or Apple Podcasts via the link in the description below. Hope you join us for the journey.